Hello. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Well, good morning also if you are in North America. So I'm really happy to have you here. Uh, so my name is Wajdi Zaghouani. I'm an assistant professor in digital humanities at the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at HBKU, Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar. I'm really excited to welcome you into another webinar of the series organized by the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, the Middle Eastern Studies Department at HBKU. So today we are presenting a special session that will cover the issue of polarization and hate speech detection in social media using natural language processing and computational linguistics methods. As you know, in recent years, social media started to raise like serious concerns, especially when posted messages include racist and hate speech and like all of these offensive messages we saw online in recent years. And these offensive messages are really targeting some individuals, some minorities, some communities, and they are really affecting these communities. And so the issue is really a major problem now. It's not something that can be solved in using one approach or one method. So it's like studies have shown that like we need to have various interventions, such as legal interventions, such as digital literacy approach to teach people how to better behave and understand the effect of such behavior online. And some of these interventions also are used by these the social media companies who are like also concerned with this with hate speech online. And one major breakthrough, what we can say in social media and in the ways we can detect such and prevent such behavior online. So using artificial intelligence methods, including, of course, natural language processing technology and language technologies. And this can indeed help maybe prevent and reduce the effect of such like behavior online. So to learn more about this topic and to learn about the methods and ways that we can use NLP and computational linguistics, I'm really pleased today to have with me a very interesting and very, like I'm really excited to have a panel with Dr. Hala Mulki, Dr. Marcus Zampieri, Dr. Khaled Elghamry, and also Dr. Mucahid Kutlu. So our speakers today will share with us their recent advance and recent research on detecting polarization and hate speech online. And our first speaker will be Dr. Hala Mulki, and her talk will be on Levantine Twitter dataset for misogynic language. So Dr. Mulki, she's coming from the Middle Eastern Studies Center in Ankara, Turkey. And just so before we continue, also just to a quick reminder, so I forgot to tell you about the Q&A. There is a possibility that you can, all over the session, you can ask your question using the Q&A function in this in the WebEx. And so we will have like 15 minutes presentation followed by 5 minutes for questions. So Dr. Hala she is a data scientist. She's interested in computational linguistics with socio-political domain. She obtained her PhD in computer engineering from Seljuk University in Turkey. Back in 2019, actually. Sorry. Previously, she worked as a researcher and teaching assistant at Aleppo University in Syria. Her research interests are social media analysis, opinion mining, stance detection, abusive language and hate speech detection, and of course, user behavior analysis and prediction. So all of that, I think this is an exciting profile. And thank you so much, Hala, for joining us today. And
My pleasure.
great. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Okay. I'm going to be sharing my content right now.
Sure.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you, Dr. Wajdi. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. Today, I'm going to be introducing Let Me, which is a benchmark dataset, the first Arabic and Levantine Twitter dataset for misogynistic language used against journalists. Actually, we all know that social media has made a sea change in the journalism industry. Journalists now can benefit from many merits of social media, among of which is like reaching more people, engaging more with audience, and also having the possibility to get instant impressions, evaluations for their shared material. However, this might combine a bit of toxic aspect, especially for female journalists. According to a study made by an NGO, female journalists receive 3 times toxicity more than their male counterparts. Actually, such toxicity is referred to as misogyny. Misogyny, formally speaking, is about showing hatred of or contempt for women. It's, of course, type of hate speech that disparages a person or a group having the female gender identity. The misogynistic language, on the other side, can be expressed using 6 expression styles or forms. We will talk about them later. In all of these forms, gender inequality, mistreatment of women, and women underestimation are unfortunately enforced and justified. Not far from all their peers all over the world, women in Arabic Twitter sphere is not an exception. This was noticed during the revolution in Lebanon last year. With journalists being the top contributors in the material shared online at that time, female journalists had to face a lot of misogyny within systematic bullying campaign. In order to make Twitter a safer platform for them, we need to develop and design systems for automatic online misogyny, for automatic detection of Arabic misogyny. This cannot be done without the needed training and annotated data. Therefore, we opted to propose Let Me, which to be a benchmark dataset, the first Arabic and Levantine benchmark dataset annotated for the several categories of misogynistic language. Like any other dataset, our dataset went through 4 periods, reaching to the release phase. For the data collection or data crawling, we first identified the accounts of the top active journalists on Twitter and collected the replies they got during the period from October, right after the incident, till November 3rd, about 2 weeks. Then, in order to assure that those replies are directed to the journalists themselves, we had to reduce the tweet replies containing more than one mention, such that we can avoid the side conversation between the users in a tweet thread. Having the direct replies obtained, then we do the deduplication and released what we can call the draft dataset, which composed of 6,600 unique directed replies obtained from the timelines of 7 female journalists representing different Lebanese news agencies, each of which has its own agenda, of course, while the distribution of tweet replies among the journalists can be observed according to the activity of each of them. The second phase was the data annotation. We selected to annotate our data manually. As you know, the Lebanese and Levantine dialect you cannot hire like from mechanical work or something like that. So we hired 3 annotators, Levantine native speakers, of course, all of them living in Lebanon, and provided them with our annotation guidelines in order to make things clear for them to differentiate the misogynistic behaviors or categories. For example, in the discredit category, what users do is just throwing slurs over women with no larger intention, while the dominance category is about like showing the male superiority the male is better than the female. Derailing is about justifying the abuse against women and reject the male responsibility. Sexual harassment is about to assert physical power over women, threat of violence, threatening women by violent acts. Stereotyping and objectification is was a little bit confusing for annotators, so we had to merge them together because most of the tweets are trying to like correlate to women with a specific oversimplified image widely held by people, of course, and other tweet replies are trying to do some objectification, which means that criticizing the physical appeal of a woman comparison to narrow standards also. In this data set and inspired by the Arabic culture and the Lebanese culture in particular, we added an extra category which is damning. I think Arabs will relate here. We in the Arab region adopt the damning philosophy, where when you want someone to get hurt, you pray God, okay, I wish God that someone will get hurt. This was very important in order to differentiate the damning category from the threat of violence, because I'm not going to hurt the journalist myself or by some group. I'm wishing God that this journalist will be dead or will be sick, for example. And of course, the non-misogynistic are those tweets that do not contain the previous mentioned specifications. Moreover, we enriched our annotation guidelines with specific terms and phrases inspired by the revolution context and also by the Lebanese culture as well. For example, this word called sahsouh, for example, has been developed during the revolution and it refers to act of violence. Similarly, we provided our annotators with such terms in order to understand the context much better and provide more reliable annotations. Having the data annotated, now we are ready to explore our obtained data set. We have a semi-balanced data set between the misogynistic, the general categories, of course, the misogynistic category and the non-misogynistic, while the misogynistic behaviors were distributed within the misogynistic category as follows. As we can see here, the discredit category is dominant among all the misogynistic categories. This can be attributed actually to the fact that users, while attacking women, they follow the easiest way, meaning just like throwing slurs over women, while the other types of misogynistic language requires like more complex composition of the tweet. On the other hand, we also explored the share of misogynistic content each journalist received during the collection period. As we can see here, regardless of the news agency each journalist represents, and regardless the material, while it's neutral news, opinion, all of them have got a share of misogynistic content. This means that women working in media are attacked for just their gender identity. For further exploration of our dataset, we defined also the top 10 frequent terms in each misogynistic categories. This graph clarifies how each class contains the top 10 frequent words, while nodes having bigger size refers that this word is common among more than one class. For example, the name of the journalist J1, we blurred the real names of journalists, of course. The name of journalist J1 has been mentioned as a top frequent word in the sexual harassment, stereotyping, derailing, and threats of violence categories. Also, the word Sayyid is common between the discredit and dominance. For a better understanding how these top frequent words are used within the dataset, we generated the biogram word cloud. Here's a sample of them. As you can see here, the category we've already added, damning, the most frequent word in Arabic, like يؤبر قلبك, for example, it's not mean like I want him to bury your heart, literally. It means that I pray God that you will die before him. That's why adding this category was very important in terms of considering the context, the culture, and the idioms of the environment we are investigating. Lastly, we provided an evaluation of the judgments provided by our annotators using the inter-rater agreement measures. First of all, we used pairwise percentage agreement that do not take chance agreements in consideration. Then we use Cohen's kappa, which resolves the previous problem and got those agreement ratios. As we can see here, female annotators achieve higher agreement compared when they correlated with male counterparts. As a final evaluation of the annotations of our dataset, we adopted the Krippendorf alpha measurement, which was equal to 86%, and thus refer that the consistency of the annotations and thus the credibility of Let Me dataset as a benchmark dataset for online misogynistic language detection. Okay, so our annotators, despite they have high agreement values, they disagree on some tweets, of course. So we aim to further investigate where do the annotators disagree. As we can see here, in general, the disagreement ratio in misogynistic category was more than non-misogynistic, of course, while the disagreements percentages values in the misogynistic behaviors were much more. As we can see, this can be justified by the fact that identifying the misogyny content in general is more easier than recognition of the misogynistic behavior. In order to further explore this, we collected some interesting tweets where our annotators disagreed. For example, as we can see here, the agreement between the two female annotators is clear right here. And regarding some, for example, here for the threat of violence tweet, the male interpreted this as a derailing. Here we can see that females are more sensitive to any violent contents and consider this like the major idea of the tweet. That's why they annotated it as threats of violence. On the other hand, females can also understand the culture of damning, of praying God to harm someone more than males. In addition, males, for example, this is a sarcasm tweet. Males have a better understanding of sarcasm style, while one female expressed this or understood this as threat of violence, the other one understood it as a derailing. As a conclusion, we can say that the phenomenon of misogyny is still out there, not only on Twitter, but on all social media platforms, so that we aimed to, as a future step for our research, to provide a multi-dialectal Arabic dataset for automatic detection of Arabic misogyny. To achieve that, we've already collected tweets during the bullying campaign against Al Jazeera female news anchors in June 2020. And also we are aiming to extend our Let Me dataset by combining also tweets collected from the second wave of Lebanon revolution from June to July 2020. Also, like past year, where we witnessed a shared task for Arabic hate speech, we are looking forward to include LetMe dataset in a task for Arabic online misogynistic, Arabic automatic detection of misogynistic languages. Another aspect of this research might be author profiling, where we are going to investigate who are behind those misogynistic replies, misogynistic tweets, who are the real women's enemies or bullies in the Arabic Twitter sphere. And that's all. Thank you for your hearing.
Great, thank you so much, Hala. Amazing. I mean, I think this is much needed like work, much needed effort. I mean, especially given the lack of such data sets for the Arabic language, and this will help indeed improve the situation of Arabic language technologies. I really appreciate. So let's great, thank you. So let's open the floor now for question. I will check the questions so far. So I have a couple of questions. So the first question was, so did you notice similar patterns in general tweets? I mean, those not related to female journalists. This question is from Bilal Ghanem.
Yeah, like similar patterns was mostly noticed in the damning misogynistic category. Where people tend to use the same, like praying God to harm someone in the same pattern, same methods.
Good. Okay, so the other question is, do you think, so this is from Ahmed Al-Awdad, do you think you maintained the required level of objectivity in your study? How did you achieve that?
Well, actually, usually when you collect a hate speech dataset, you are relying on keyword queries, and that would result in bias, of course. But for my datasets, it's account-based. The only point that can be like discussed here is that named entity bias. As am I relying on accounts related to specific to 7 names of female journalists, so the content or the collected replies might be biased to those specific 7 names in particular, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. So Dr. Hassan Hakimian, he said, like, regarding the name, the acronym, Let Me. So he said, why it's Let Me?
Well, it's like Levantine, LE, and Twitter, and me from misogynistic, and it can indicate some meaning, of course. Let me express my word.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. Great. So I have another question from Patricia Chirel. She said, thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions. Is the data set available for the research community? So this is the first.
Yeah, it will be available soon on GitHub, publicly available.
Great. And she said also, do you make a difference between sexism and misogyny when annotating the data?
Actually not. It's misogyny as a general, then sexism was like a minor category.
Sure. Okay. So I have another question from Muna Al-Kahtani. She said, what do you mean by unique direct reply?
I mean that whenever a journalist writes a tweet, she got like several replies. Among those replies, users are talking to each other sometimes. So in order to assure that this reply is really directed to the journalist, not to other users, we like filters tweets containing more than 1 mention other than the mention of the journalist.
Okay, sure. I have a question related to the method. How did you collect your data and analyze your data? Yes.
Yeah, Twitter API.
API, yes.
Yeah.
And they are freely available, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So I have many questions related to the data. They want to get your data, actually.
Okay.
So I think everyone is expecting. So hopefully, like you will see, you will publish that soon. So on GitHub, you said.
Yes.
I have a question. Do you think there is? Okay, just sorry. Yeah, many questions coming. I mean, it's very hard to. Yeah, it's.
They can feel free to email me the question.
Yes, I think that could be. So one question: do you think that they would be made more sense to include the control male journalist data?
Control male journalist.
Like maybe another similar data, but for male journalists instead of female journalists.
Oh yeah, but you know, male journalists are not that much like threatened by attacks on Twitter. But it could be. Sure.
Yes. Yeah. Also, one question from Evelyn Reuter. She said, "Did you inform the female journalists that you investigated these aspects?"
Well, all of these accounts are public, of course, and I have been in contact with one of them, independent journalist, and she has delivered my research, the objective of me to them, and they were very pleased with this because they were like seeking methods to the prohibition of bullies' account, and this is one way to facilitate this, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we have so many questions and we are running out of time. So maybe we'll just one question. So does the data set contain the context of the reporter?
Yeah,
the reporter and the journalist. Like also, did you notice certain trigger or for harassment?
Yeah, of course. For example, one of the journalists stated something criticizing one politician in Lebanon, and after that there was a spike of the tweets, and there was been a hashtag every day trending in Lebanon for 1 week, including like insulting the hashtag itself was insulting this journalist. Other journalists has been like beaten at the protests, and after that also Twitter has been exploded. So for each one of journalists there have been some context, and according to that context it got attention and got much more replies.
I see, interesting. So I'm really sorry for the many questions still remaining, and I think I invite everyone. So we have all your emails, and I think you have the emails of Dr. Hala, and I think we can get in touch and continue the conversation offline. Great.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you again, Hala, and
thank you, Dr. West.
Thank you. It's very insightful. Our next speaker, without further ado, is Dr. Khaled Elghamry. So I welcome Dr. Khaled. Dr. Khaled he will be talking about like a lexicon-based detection and measuring of hate speech in the Arabic Twitter sphere. Dr. Khaled Elghamry is an associate professor of computational linguistics at Ain Shams University, Egypt. He holds a PhD in computational linguistics from the Department of Linguistics, Indiana University, where he's now a visiting scholar. Dr. Khaled research interests include Arabic computational lexical semantics with a special focus on sentiment analysis and semantics taxonomies, Arabic social media, web mining, and digital humanities. Dr. Khaled is the co-founder of the Arabic Thought Foundation statistical database of the Arabic web content. He has published books and articles in Arabic on the disruptive social and cultural effects of social internet, of the internet and social media. So many thanks. Thank you so much, Dr. Khaled, for joining us today, and really appreciate again. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is it, can you see it right now?
I think yes, sure.
Okay. So I would like first to thank you for an invitation to talk in this very important event about polarization and hate speech, which is garnering an increasing interest all over the world right now in the recent years. In this talk, I'll basically present some ongoing research on some experiments on lexicon-based detection and measuring of hate speech in the Arabic Twitter sphere. So basically, I'll give an introduction. The talk will go like, I'll give an introduction about the size of user-generated content on social media, previous work, touch upon previous work, some definition and types of hate speech, and then the contribution is threefold. How to, just like the method I used to bootstrap hate lexicon for Arabic. And I'm trying to experiment with a measure of the seriousness of hate speech. And I will talk more on this later, and how these how this lexicon can be used in the identification of hate speech targets in the Arabic Twitter, and then some future directions on research to come. As we can see, the volume or the number of users of social media worldwide from 2010 and to next year, 2021, is projected to be more than 3 billion users worldwide. So we're talking about a decent size of people using the social media to present or to express their point of view, to express their attitudes, stances on things, and of course to spread some negative content, either it is offensive language in general or hate speech that is targeting some classes of people. There has been some previous work. Marcus already mentioned some of them. So some previous work touching upon different aspects of hate speech, either like identification of distinguishing between hate speech and profanity in general, like Malmasi and Marcus, 2017. And then there is template-based identification of hate speech, as in Selva et al. 2016. And some work has been done on using the identification of hate speech for policy and decision-making, and this is Burnett and Williams 2015. And there's some work on detecting anti-Semitic hate speech in online text 2012. And there is an emerging interest in detecting hate speech in social media in Arabic, and this is one of the features in the asset demo that you guys and HBKU are working on, which is really interesting work. So I'm trying to build on these and present some resources that can be used in the identification and detection and measure of hate speech in Arabic. I'll be using this operational definition of hate speech as any abusive speech targeting specific group characteristics such as ethnic origin, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. And this one is used from Werner and Hirschberg 2012. As for hate speech, based on previous literature, there are different types of hate. On top of them is dehumanizing metaphors, where the target or the targets of hate are looked upon as subhumans, or as we're going to see later on, as subhumans like insects or animals, etc. The second type is using divisive language or didactic language, which is basically us versus them. So the target is usually them. And this is related to the othering techniques, using about the target of hate as the other. Or the idea of nativism, the idea we belong here and you don't belong, especially in countries that have a lot of immigrants going to them. The fifth type is unsubstantiated claims, that usually you just attach an opinion to the target that has not been supported by any concrete evidence. Flawed argumentation, which is basically based on logical fallacies, that use this kind of logical fallacies to attribute some bad features to or opinions to the targets of hate. Okay, so given this, the first step for me was how to bootstrap hate speech at a lexicon for Arabic. Usually, when in the bootstrapping process, you have a seed that is made of good examples of what you need, and here we need terms of hate speech, and you grow this seed using some bootstrap and I'm using the conjunction or coordination structure in Arabic to bootstrap as a bootstrap. And this first phase of bootstrap creates new instances in addition to the seed, and you repeat the bootstrapping process until you have a stopping criterion here, which is you can't identify more instances of your target term. So at this point, you stop. The seed I used was 25 frequent hate speech terms in Arabic discourse as manually identified by Bahauddin in 2012. And the seed as given by Baha represented the target as one of these. And I'd like to apologize for any offensive language, because this is, I tried to minimize the offensive language as much as I can. So I apologize for any strongly offensive language that will be touched upon in the presentation. So according to Baha, the target of hate speech could be represented as low, dirty, insane, lecherous, as an animal like a pig, low, base, dirty, rational, shameless, etc. And we'll see that the classes of these hate speech terms later on. So this is the seed, 25 words that I used as a bootstrap. And I added to this the seed, the synonyms or the need synonyms of these seed terms using synonyms in almani.com, which is an online lexical resource for Arabic. And as a result of this, 69 new adjectives and nouns were added to the original seed. So the total now is 94 hate terms. Okay. These terms were used as Twitter search terms using the Twitter API from the period of January 2011 up to January 2016. And of course, I'm going to expand on, for future research, we're going to try to get a larger, more fine geolocated sample of tweets. Searches were conducted such that once with the coordinated conjunction, while or and, preceding each term, and once without. So we're trying to find the coordinate structures or constructions where the seed terms occur. And the sample was made such that every month in the period mentioned was sampled. Okay, tweets containing these terms and emojis, smiley emojis, were excluded on the assumption that these are usually sarcastic tweets. Of course, I still need to check that if sarcastic still expresses hate speech or it's just pure sarcasm. Okay. So the next step after having this search is the terms coordinating with at least 3 terms in the seed were extracted and manually filtered to identify potential hate speech terms. The bootstrapping was again repeated for newly added terms until new terms were identified. So we have a total, after the bootstrapping phases ended, we have a total of 434 new nouns and adjectives with a total of 527 terms. The new examples that were identified in addition to the seed were presenting the hate target as trash or prone, or using one of these hate speech terms that were not in the original seed. Okay. So in the original seed, the targets of hate were represented as low, dirty, hypocrite, irrational, infidel, shameless, or outsider, or as subhuman, through using dehumanizing animal metaphors, describing targets as pigs or dogs, among other things. Extended lexicon was analyzed to identify the overall classes of target representations as represented or expressed by the hate speech in the lexicon. So that the classes, after manually classifying the classes of hate speech terms, these were the classes that were found to be to cover all these terms, starting from the representing a target as low, or targeting some personal features or characteristics in the target as someone who's a coward, someone who's lazy, etc., or representing the hate speech target as dishonest, or like an animal, or immoral, or rational, or dirty, or outsider, or shameless, up to the up to the bottom of the list. So these are the classes that I found to be relevant to in the classification of the hate speech terms. So in addition to the single word hate speech terms, a list was made of word sequences that coordinate with or immediately follow these seeds. So I'm trying to find, in addition to the single word, multiple word expressions or multiple word sequence patterns that are used to express hate. So for a sequence of words to qualify as a potential hate pattern, it should coordinate with or immediately follow at least 3 unique hate terms in the core lexicon. This list was manually filtered to identify productive patterns and expressions of hate. The resulting expressions were then grouped into more general patterns, and these patterns I found. The first pattern was the son of pattern. Usually this pattern starts with the word for son, ibn, or the word bint, followed by one of the nouns that express loneliness. And again, I'm sorry for the words, but these are the words that usually used in the son of shoe, son of donkey, son of etc., or daughter of one of these words. So this is the first pattern, which is the son of pattern. The second pattern, and I think Hala touched upon the damning or the cursing pattern to express hate through cursing expressions. And this pattern can be realized in different forms. In La'natullahi ala, may Allah curse someone, La'na ala, followed by the target, or La'na Allah, and then followed by target, or La'nahumullah after the target, or again, alayhim la'natullah after the target, or the more productive one, Ya Rab, or Allahumma, followed by a word that expresses destruction, dispersion, burning, wiping out, elimination, or eradication. So this is the second pattern, which is using the cursing, one of the cursing patterns to express hate against the target. The third and most important pattern, which is the deserve pattern. This pattern is basically an expression with the general meaning of deserve, which is usually a noun or a verb like يستاهل, يستحق, or حلال فيه, or يجب, or لازم, or حق, or one of these deserve meaning words or expressions, followed by a noun or phrase that express a violent act. For example, could be followed by a noun like al-mashnaq يستحق المشنقة. So this is one of the words that can realize the pattern. Or it could be followed by a verbal noun like يستحق القتل, يستحق الإعدام, يستحق التصليب. And it could be followed by an infinitive phrase in the passive form like يستحق أن يقتل or يستحق يتقتل if you're using the regional dialect. So we have these 3 patterns of hate: the son of pattern, the cursing pattern, and the deserve pattern, of course, in addition to the regular pattern. So we have these examples of the deserve pattern, because this one is going to play a central role in measuring series of hate. So we have these examples: hashara was that's an insect and deserve to be crushed. These are based on real tweets. Hayawan was is an animal and deserved to be killed, etc. So these are examples of the deserve pattern. Of course, in addition to the regular straightforward I hate pattern that is frequently used to explicitly express hate using the verb akra or one of its synonyms that express different degrees of hate in one of the following expressions, like I la utiqu kaza someone, or I am with someone, or akrah someone, or ahtaqir someone. So we have the 3 main patterns in addition to this explicit straightforward pattern. So now we have these terms, these patterns that express hate. So I realized something when I was working with the deserve pattern, that this pattern seems to strongly encode the potential violence that could be justified against the target of hate for having feature X expressed by hate term T. So of course I'm going to elaborate on this. So the nouns, when we say, like, remember in the deserve pattern, we have a noun or a noun or a verbal noun or an infinitive clause that follow the deserve expression seem, and this phrase or clause or nouns seem to correlate with the seriousness of hate expressed by the hate term. So using this, we can, I'm just made the assumption, of course, this needs a lot of future testing and experimentation about, I'm not claiming any causality, I'm just saying there is a strong correlation between these two. So I'm suggesting a seriousness score for a hate term T as a function of its frequency of co-occurrence with the vertic pattern, the pattern that express physical punishment against the hate target for having this feature. So we have the FT physics class is basically the frequency of the hate term with deserved phrases expressing physical punishment, and we're going to have a look at these in a second. And then the verdict class, which is frequency of the hate term T with the verdict phrases in general. The value of the hate score, the serious score, could be 0 to 1, where 1 indicates extreme seriousness of hate and a higher likelihood of speech triggering violence against target. So one way of this seriousness score is as an indicator of potential violent acts that the hate term could instigate in reality if it hits what I called in 2015 virtual critical mass, which is the point where what is said in the virtual space starts to overflow onto the real world. So just to, because time is up, so I'm going to go quickly through the remaining slides. So these are the classes of, the vertical classes that follow the deserve pattern, and the ones in orange are the ones that express physical violence against the target of hate because of having a given feature. Okay, so this is example, for example, the word infidel is the highest in terms of seriousness that like triggers, it's like whenever you have a target of hate that it is represented as kafir, usually the seriousness score was the highest, followed by the score of representing the target as criminal or insect or pig or dog or cancer, etc. So I use this to identify top targets in hate speech, and using the Silva 2016 template based. And these are the top 28 targets starting work from Shia, Sunnah, and this work that I'm presenting is based on a very early version of detecting hate speech between Sunnah and Shia on Twitter. That was 2012. So these are the top targets of hate in the sample on the Arabic Twitter sphere. And I think that's it. And future work, of course, I'm going to cover more. I like get a larger sample that extends to 2020, experiment with seriousness and measuring methods for hate and target specific hate speech. And thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Khaled. Really, again, this is another insightful and I think very valuable contribution actually, because we notice most of the research now is ongoing on deep learning, machine learning, and not much have been done recently in terms of rule-based pattern, studying the pattern, studying like going back to the linguistics, basics. And this is really, I appreciate that. And so I also have two questions. So first, is your data available? Can we get your data? Is it it's possible to get your data?
Yeah, as I said, it's work in progress, and I'm trying to expand the data to cover not by month and not by day, by the hour. So I'm expanding this, and I'll make it available as soon as it is ready.
Great. One more question. So one person he asked about, like, since he's in Morocco, they said like they are not using much Twitter, so they are more into Facebook. So would you be able to easily adapt your approach and gather data from Facebook instead?
Actually, that's the set one. The phase is to cover Twitter, the comments in YouTube, the comments, and the Facebook. So this is one of the future directions that I was going to talk about, is to cover especially Facebook, which is much more widely used than Twitter. And even in terms of number, in terms of quality of audience, there are different audiences. So yes, I'm going to cover Facebook in the future.
Perfect. One last question, since we don't have much time. So from Mustafa Jarrar, he said, which approach is more effective, lexicon-based or deep learning based for detecting, you mean, hate speech?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know. I don't have numbers, but they are not exclusive. This is what I'm understanding. Yes. Usually, as you noticed, I'm using a bootstrapping approach, which can be used to bootstrap data for training, which will cut the labor, time and labor in machine. So they are not, for me, they are not exclusive. They can
complement,
be in a hybrid system or a hybrid model.
Perfect. Great. I really appreciate it again. Thank you, Dr. Khaled. So a very interesting talk. Thank you. Okay, great. So our next and final speaker for today is Dr. Mucahid Kutlu. He will be talking about qualitative analysis of polarization in Turkey via social media. So Dr. Mucahid is an assistant professor at TOBB ETU in Turkey. He holds a PhD degree in computer science and engineering from the Ohio State University. Prior to joining TOBB ETU, he has worked as a postdoc researcher at Qatar University between 2015 and 2018, so he's familiar with Qatar. His research interests include natural language processing, information retrieval, social media analytics, and computational social sciences. So without further ado, Dr. Mucahid, the floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me to this great webinar. So first, I'll share my screen for the presentation. And before start, how many minutes do I have?
15 minutes. So we are running out of time. I'm really sorry for the audience. Like maybe we'll just have an extra 5 or 10 minutes from their time because we plan to finish at 8:30, but maybe we'll have an extra 10 minutes.
Okay.
Again, so apologies.
My screen is seen by everyone?
Yes, I can see your screen. Perfect.
Hello. So today I'll talk about our work, which is about embedding-based qualitative analysis of polarization in Turkey. So before I start our study, let me give you some background information about Turkish politics. I had checked the attendees, but I didn't see many Turkish people, so I think it might be useful. So multi-political party elections has been held in Turkey since 1946, and usually there's a very high turnout in the elections. And in this last presidential elections in 2018, it was 86%. And in Turkish politics, there are more than 20 political parties, but I mean, we can say that only 6 of them are major. And in the last elections now, here you see the political party names and the election results for each party. And as you know, Erdogan rules the country since 2003. And this election, while there are 6 different parties you see here, the atmosphere of the election was like whether he will continue or whether he will lose the election and another person will win the election. So that was actually either Erdogan or not Erdogan. So that was, even in the social media, there was a very popular hashtag, which was, one of them was tamam. In Turkish, it means okay, enough. And the other one was devam, which means continue. And Turkey is known with high polarization. So when you look at the mainstream media, for example, here you see two different medias. For example, the one at the left says Tayyip will be the 37th Sultan, so criticizing him with his power. The other one says a leader who is the voice of oppressed people. So there's a huge contrast between these two ones. And here you see again another images from news media. One of them says all dictators lose in the streets, and they put also a caricature of Erdogan, as you see. And the other one says commander-in-chief never left the lines, soldiers alone. So there's a huge contrast. You see that how they think, how they see Erdogan is. And it's not also, of course, only on mainstream media, it's also on social media. The one in the above, for example, Tibet, it's written by a Turkish person, and she also defines Erdogan as a dictator. While when you look at the other one, I put the translation at the right, he says, not a statue or not a fountain, a hospital has been built in 45 days, you have to work as hard as an ant to make huge achievements, the leader of the century. So, well, one of them sees him as a dictator, while the other one sees him as a hardworking, successful leader. So if you look at these people, if you just mask the name, you would think that they were talking about different people. One of them considers him as a dictator, while the other one considers him as a sensitive, hardworking, successful leader. So there's a huge gap in terms of how they see Erdogan. But actually, it's not only Erdogan. So it's not only about him. When we look at other political figures, other topics, we also see that. For example, at the left, there's the person you see is the leader of the Kurdish party, Selahattin Demirtas, and they say that he's been chosen as war leader, while the one at the right, sorry, I don't know why, but for some reason, I'm not able to control my...
Oh, it's fine. So,
sorry.
Is it okay now? Yeah, you can restart again. This slide, yeah.
So the other one says, sorry for this, the other one says that he's a murderer due to his supportive events that caused that of 50%. So one side says world leader, the other one says murderer. So the question is, they see those people as completely different. And the definition of Erdogan and the definition of or Selahattin Demirtas are completely different in their mind. And we want to know what is the first thing they think when they think about Erdogan or some other people. What is the difference? So how they define these people or topics, etc. So it's hard to ask people to come up with a dictionary to define Erdogan and to do that. But actually, we can use, we can get the idea of Ludwig Wittgenstein. He says that the meaning of a word is its use in the language. So this powerful statement was actually behind in many achievements in natural language processing. Motivated by this idea, natural language processing researchers developed word embedding models. So what is a word embedding model? Well, basically we write words with letters, but we cannot do any operation with those letters. It doesn't make sense to do any mathematical operation. But word embedding models actually represent each word as a numerical vector. And when I do have numerical vectors, I can do any mathematical operation on them. So that's fantastic. as long as it is true, as long as we can keep this syntactic and semantic knowledge in that. And many experiments show that, yeah, word embeddings keep many useful information about the words. For example, since we now represent the words as numerical vectors, we can do mathematical operation. I can subtract man from king, and then if I add woman, you get the closest vector word which should be queen. Or I can subtract Qatar from Doha, and if I add Britain, I should get London. That kind of stuff, and people showed it a lot, of course. And so in another study, for example, when we do have these word embedding models, we can also apply it to in social studies. For example, how can we check the semantic change in words? So I got the word documents from 1920s, for example. In this study, they did that. And then I also get the documents from 2000, and I built separate word embedding models, because these word embedding models, there's no annotation at all. We just give the documents, and then what they do is that for each word, what is the word in simple language? What is the word surrounding those words? So by looking at the neighboring words, we give the meaning of the words. And then once we have different word embedding models built on different documents, we compare the same word in each model. For example, for the how the meaning of the word dog changed from 1910 to 2000. So in another study, and this study was actually one of the main motivation and main inspired study for ours, they did this to analyze ethnic stereotypes and gender stereotypes. So basically, they again built separate word embedding models using different documents written in 1910s, 1950s, 1990s. And then they checked, for example, in this table, what you see here is that they gathered some Chinese names, and then they checked what are the closest adjectives for those Chinese names. So when we are talking about word embedding models, it's like a space, so I can calculate what is the closest word. And I expect that the words semantically similar, semantically same, should be close to each other. So what they see is that, for example, in 1920s, you see lots of many offensive or bad adjectives for the Chinese names. But as you move forward in the time, when in the 1990s, at least still there are some bad adjectives, but you also see some positive ones like active, sensitive, hardy, and so on. So we thought that, can we apply this idea to analyze social polarization? So what we want to do is basically, what we did actually, we crawled tweets during 2018 presidential elections in Turkey. And then we labeled users if they support Erdogan or not. And then using tweets of pro-Erdogan accounts, we built a word embedding model. And also using tweets of anti-Erdogan accounts, we built another word embedding model. And then we checked we compared the word embedding word vectors of the same words in different models to see how their semantic is changed, how their semantic is different. So to give more detail, we track keywords in our crawl, like political party names, candidate names, hashtags, different terms about politics. Eventually, we collected 108 million tweets. Then we did a quick manual labeling process by just looking at the user descriptions, user account names. Here you see, for example, and people were very loud, very open about their political influence. We could label only those kind of accounts in this process. So, but by doing that, actually, we could label 3,866 users. And then we applied a label propagation process in which we considered that if a person, for example, retweeted 10 or more tweets from pro-Erdogan accounts, and no retreat from anti-Erdogan accounts. We label that user as pro-Erdogan. And the same thing applies for the anti-Erdogan group, of course. And we did it in an iterative process. And at the end of 11th iteration, we could label 279,000 users as pro-Erdogan and 374,000 users as anti-Erdogan. So that was a huge number of labels we got. But we didn't stop here. Roughly 6 months later from the election times, we also started to crawl timelines of randomly selected users that we labeled in the first process. So in this, we hope that in this 6 months period, the bots will be closed and so on. We hope that. And we crawled 86,000 timelines of 86,000 of pro-Erdogan accounts and 82,000 accounts from anti-Erdogan group. And we downloaded all their timelines, so we try to crawl as much as we can. It doesn't only cover election time period. And then we build word embedding model. We have 4 different data sets actually, 2 from election data, pro and anti-group, and also 2 from timeline data, one for pro-Erdogan and one for anti-Erdogan group. Once we have it, then we ask our main question, what is the closest adjectives for the word Erdogan in these 2? I'm just showing for the 2, but we have actually 4 for these different word embedding models. And here you see the adjective we see, and here the order of the words matter. So the ones at the top are the closest words, and the ones at the bottom are the further ones. So here, when you see that, if in the left one you see the adjectives coming from the pro-Erdogan group, and they say my Erdogan, our Erdogan, leader, independent, my military commander-in-chief, president of the people, you see world leader, and so on. So there are actually many words with positive sentiment. And get anti-Erdogan group, you see a very different definition of Erdogan, like you see evil-born dictator. The word insult, you see here, we didn't want to translate it to English, so that was, we just want to put it a fixed term for that. And you see neo-Nazi Führer, sultan, murderer, cruel, liar, traitor, terrorist, and so on. So there's a huge contrast here, as you can see. Well, you might also ask, why do we see this dictator, PKK supporter here? One theory we have is that it's because of irony, and people do a lot in social media. And the second one is we labeled people as pro-Erdogan based on the elections. In that elections, Turkish nationalist movement party supporters also supported Erdogan, but in the last election they were anti-Erdogan. So there was some kind of a Turkish politics specific, there might be some Turkish politics specific issues, but still when we look at the big picture, well, there's a huge contrast, as you can see. And what about the other politicians? Well, for example, what about the Selahattin Demirtas, the Kurdish party leader? You see from the pro group, there is no positive adjective. And when you look at anti-group, well, there's only one word with a negative sentiment. So there's again huge difference. And what about for example, the other secular party leader, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu? Again, you see when you look at the pro-Erdogan group, you see, I don't want to read them loud, but you can see that lots of very words with negative sentiment. But in the anti-group, you see also some positive ones, like hope of the people, our prime minister, the fear of the immoral people. And again, you can see why we see this immoral at the very top. And well, that might be, again, we labeled them as anti-Erdogan, but this anti-Erdogan group covers many people from different ideologies. So that might be also the reason. But still, again, we see a huge difference for these politicians. And the good thing with this approach is, and actually this is why I like this approach, is that we can analyze topic, we can do some topic-specific polarization analysis. For example, we can give any name and check the names for this. For example, FETA is the group that is considered as behind the coup attempt in 2016 in Turkey. So as you can see, both group, pro and anti-Erdogan groups, are all using adjectives with negative sentiments. So they're pretty unified in this. And when you look at also for the YPG, which is the Kurdish militant group in Syria, you see again, there is no adjective with a positive sentiment. There might be some, you might think them as, I mean, no sentiment at all, like leftist, right-leaning, jealous, socialist. That depends on your worldview. But again, there's no positive words, but there are lots of words with negative sentiments. So again, it seems that the people who disagrees a lot on their other politicians, they really agree on how they define YPG or FETA and so on. And well, the good thing with this kind of approach is that we can apply it to anything. So, for example, we can do lifestyle shows like drink, food, vacation, with those kind of stuff. And for example, we've seen some really interesting thing when we did that. For example, so you can think these tables as like how they define drink. What is the first things that comes into your mind when we say drink? And when we look at the pro-Erdogan, which are known as more conservative, or are known as conservative people. So we do not see, for example, any, I mean, we see only one alcoholic beverage here, but when we had look at the anti-group, I didn't list all of them, but we've seen 10 different alcoholic beverages. So we see that there's also a different lifestyle. And when we also check the food, for example, we've seen, for example, in the pro group, we see iftar and sahur, which are special meals during Ramadan, but we don't see those words in the anti-group. And in the anti-group, anti-Erdogan group, we see wine, for example. And also, we see also some, for example, I also highlighted these red ones like chi köfte and tre. These are the traditional, more local food, for example. So, but when we look at the anti-Erdogan group, we've seen more Western cuisine like bechamel sauce, pudding, chips, pizza, and so on. So there are some similarities like breakfast, sandwich, but we are also able to catch the differences in their lifestyles with this approach. So what is the limitations? Of course, there are limitations. First, the limitation is the bias in our labeled dataset. Social media is not representative of the all population, and we cannot label all people. Our labeling process has some bias, of course. There's language-specific issues, like there's too many different words in agglutinative languages as Turkish. So this decreases the quality of the word embedding models, and a single word carries too many information. So this makes it hard to the qualitative analysis. The typos is really a big problem. Like people, I mean, for example, for the word terrorist, I've seen like 30 different types of types of a single word just because of the typos. People use irony a lot. So, for example, they call pro-Erdogan groups call Erdogan dictator just to make fun of people who calls him dictator. So that happens a lot. And also we are doing a word level analysis. So, but same words have different meanings or it might refer to the different person. For example, Erdogan is a very common name in Turkey. So that's when you select a name, that you should also be sure that it's reasonably unique and so on. And so to conclude, we've seen that the word embeddings do help us to understand community-specific semantics of words, so how different groups of people define different words. And And then we can use these word vectors, and they're useful to analyze topic-specific polarization. And of course, there exist limitations to be improved, which actually we are also working on that. Thank you for listening. And now I think I can take your questions.
Thank you so much, Mucahid. Really, really, I think it's very, very intuitive, and I like the approach you used. I mean, and the way that you displayed how different parties are having different kind of even food, you know, varieties. It's really, really very, very insightful. And so we don't have much time for questions, but like let me just quickly. So regarding your approach, can this approach be applied easily, like to other languages such Arabic, for example?
Yes, sure, of course. I mean, if you have Arabic tweets, you can just build your own word embedding model for Arabic with those tweets. And as Arabic is not, for example, agglutinative language, I guess it might be even easier. It might be even more successful in Arabic, actually.
So in that case, you just need like a list of seed words or trigger words like you used, and then you apply your, yeah.
Yeah, you just need a huge set of crawl tweets. I mean, it can be a random sample or how you crawl those tweets. It's up to you. But yeah, the size of the tweets should be really high. I mean, in total, we used like 200 million tweets and so on. So that was a huge data set.
Yes. Okay. So just one other question related to the like the annotation. Did you consider also adding some sentiment or emotion or stance annotation, like in your data?
So what we had done is actually stance annotation, actually. So we first manually labeled their stance based on whether they support Erdogan or not. And then we applied a label propagation to increase our label users. But of course, that was actually one of the main bias in our data, because we could only label people who are very open about their political decision.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, adding a different stance selection would be also useful. Yes.
Yeah, because like that could complement your. Yes, sorry for again, because we are running out of time. We need to stop here, and thank you so much, Dr. Mucahid. Really, I think your approach is really. I mean, I agree with you. It could be applied, and that's something we can consider for other languages, indeed. So thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us, and so I think now we can stop. So really sorry we can't answer more questions, and. Just so please, for any question, any issue, any comments, anything, you can. I just shared in the chat like my email, so you can send me by email, and I can try to answer your requests or comments or any follow up. I can get you in touch also with the speakers in case you don't have their contact details. So, okay, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And before we leave, just I would like to announce for next week. So our series, our webinar, our College of Humanities and Social Sciences webinar series will continue. And next week we will have next Monday, same time, we will have a session on fake news and propaganda detection. It will be moderated by my colleague, Dr. Mark Jones. Thank you everyone for joining us, and see you next time.